Welcome to another episode of Altitude Shift, the podcast where I explore how to show up at work with greater executive presence and emotional steadiness. I'm your host, Kris, and in this episode, I'm going to talk about how to stop annoying yourself and others by being such a pleaser. In fact, I dedicate this episode to both my past and future selves and to yours. As a recovering pleaser myself, I needed to hear some of the things I'm about to say next, as I know many of you do too. For example, do you ever walk out of a meeting and think, why the hell did I just agree to that? You know, a request was made, you smiled, nodded, took it on, even though you didn't want to, didn't have the time, and quite frankly, you probably didn't even have to. But you still said yes. And now, my friend, you're fuming. You're fuming not because someone else did something wrong, but because deep down, you know you just abandoned yourself a little. You gave away your time, your energy, and integrity just to avoid some discomfort. Today, we're getting into the messy, often misunderstood world of people pleasing. What it really is, where it comes from, how it shows up in high performers, and most importantly, how to stop doing it without turning into a boundary-obsessed robot. We'll talk about the difference between kindness and compliance, between being helpful and being scared not to be. And I'll share some practical ways to interrupt the pattern without losing your warmth, your empathy, or your edge. So let's get into it. But first, let's start with something uncomfortable, which is exactly the kind of thing a pleaser would usually avoid. And that is that people pleasing isn't the same as being kind. It's not generosity. It's not empathy either. And what is it then? Well, I say it's a form of control. And by that, I don't mean the obvious bossy kind. I'm talking about the quieter, more manipulative kind of control. The kind that smiles, that nods, that agrees. In fact, you're not trying to dominate anyone by being a pleaser, but you are trying to manage how others see you, to shape their reactions, to steer their approval, to soften their disappointment before it even shows up. And often, you're doing it without realizing. You over-accommodate. Not out of love, but out of fear. You're not trying to connect either. You're trying to stay safe. Now, I appreciate this might sound a little over the top, but it makes total sense. Because when things feel uncertain or uncomfortable, control can feel like a form of protection, which makes people-pleasing a form of self-protection that's wrapped in friendliness. Now, here's why. Your nervous system still equates rejection with danger. It doesn't care whether someone dislikes your idea or your whole personality. It reacts like your survival is under threat. That sounds dramatic, but it is biology. We're wired to need connection. And for many of us, especially high performers, work is the tribe. It's where we get our identity, our status, even a sense of intimacy. So any hint of tension, disappointment or disapproval can feel overwhelming, and your body kicks into a stress response. And it's not always fight, flight, freeze, that stress response. There's a fourth stress response that gets much less airtime usually, especially among competent, capable people. It's called fawning, the instinct to appease. Now, fawning means instead of pushing back, you smooth over, you over-agree, you over-function, you over-give. You try to earn safety by being helpful, by being easy, agreeable. And let's be honest, it usually works, at least for a little while. But slowly, the cost creeps in. You start sidelining your own instincts, deferring when you don't want to, doubting your own judgment, saying yes when your gut says no. Not because it feels right, but because saying no feels too risky. Now, fawning might look calm on the outside, but on the inside, it's exhausting. It drains your energy, it drains your authority, and eventually it drains your whole sense of who you are. If it goes on for long enough, you stop recognizing the pattern. You stop noticing how far you've drifted from your own opinion, your own sense of self. And some people start to play their role so convincingly, and their professional Stockholm syndrome becomes so bad that they probably volunteer to help their boss to rob a bank, just to keep the peace. Now, where does this start? Of course, this people-pleasing and fawn response, it didn't start at work. It started long before. Because despite our baked-in desire to belong, no one is born a people pleaser or with an aversion to disappointing others. That was learned behavior. And more often than not, it was learned early. And it was smart. Maybe you had a parent whose mood you had to manage. Maybe you got praised for being easygoing, compliant, mommy's bestest little boy, or the teacher's golden child, the one who never caused trouble, unlike your unruly sibling. Maybe you grew up in a very volatile household where keeping the peace meant keeping yourself safe. And eventually, over the years, like many high-functioning people, you just got very good at reading the room and making sure everyone else was okay and that the room liked you back. Also, and particularly for women, neurodivergent people, and anyone straddling cultural identities, that message is often amplified. Don't be difficult. Don't make waves. Don't draw too much attention to yourself. Be grateful you're here. And a special shout out here to my LGBTQ crew, because we've learned very early on that our psychological and physical safety only comes from blending in, not from standing out. I'm not saying all of this to give you someone else to blame, but to help you recognize the survival intelligence that was baked into this pattern. Yeah, pleasing got you love, or at least it got you less conflict. It brought you approval. It protected you from scrutiny. It earned you praise. And in environments where being fully honest or speaking up was risky, it worked. But what protected you then may well be preventing you from being taken more seriously today. Because in professional life, and particularly in leadership, the cost of people-pleasing is influence. It's presence. You end up being seen as nice, but maybe a bit wet. Helpful, but not particularly strategic. And yes, you're valued as a safe pair of hands, but are people going to trust you with the tough decisions? Deep down, I suspect you know all of this, because you feel it every single time you realize you could have spoken up and you didn't. You feel it when you agree to do things that betray your gut. You feel it in the resentment afterwards towards yourself. But let's not beat ourselves up, but also let's not pretend that this pattern is harmless. It isn't, it's costing you. The work you have to do now isn't to psychoanalyze your childhood, but it's to notice the pattern in real time and then choose a different response. Now, how you do that is what I'll talk about next. How to spot when you're pleasing. Let's bring this a little closer to the surface. Because from the outside, people-pleasing and kindness can look almost identical. You're saying yes, you're being helpful, you're showing up. But what really matters is why you're doing it. And as I said earlier, people-pleasing often comes from fear. Fear of conflict, of being seen as difficult, of losing someone's approval. Kindness, on the other hand, comes from choice. It's a grounded, values-led decision to offer something freely. So one is about staying safe, the other one is about staying in integrity. But it's not always that black and white either. Sometimes we say yes because it's just part of doing our job. Sometimes we say yes because it's strategic. It's a strategic yes. We're playing the long game. We're building trust. We're investing in something that matters down the line. So rather than making it a pleasing versus kindness distinction, maybe a more useful distinction is it autopilot versus intention? So the real difference is this. With intentional action, the expectation is usually conscious and owned. What I mean by that is you know why you're saying yes. You know what you're hoping it leads to, and ideally you've made that visible, at least to yourself. But when you're people-pleasing, the expectation tends to be quieter, sometimes even invisible. You might be secretly hoping to be liked, appreciated, or be seen as good, but you haven't quite admitted that to yourself, let alone anyone else. So when the appreciation then doesn't come, what you're left with is that resentment. Not because someone crossed a boundary, but because you never clearly drew a boundary in the first place. So if you're unsure whether you're people-pleasing or not, here's one way to check in with yourself. Ask yourself, would I still do this if no one noticed or thanked me? And am I okay with that? If the answer feels tight, murky, or resentful, then pause. Because that pause might be a boundary trying to draw itself. how to interrupt the pattern. Because here is the thing, right? Recognizing the pattern is one, but interrupting it in the moment, that can be a whole different ballgame. So let's say you've caught yourself. You notice the old reflex kicking in, that familiar pressure to agree, making yourself easy and available. What do? See, I think this is a part that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not just about how to set boundaries or say no, but it's also how to actually feel more steady, how to calm yourself down when the urge to please hits you. Because in that moment, when your body tightens and your thoughts get noisy and your mouth is already halfway saying yes, you don't need a clever framework. You need a foothold, literally a foothold. And what I mean by that is you need to start in your body. You need to feel your feet on the ground. Let your weight drop into the chair if you're sitting down. You have to lean into any physical sensations that you're feeling. And that's because you can't outthink a stress response. You have to ground yourself through it physically. And once you've done that, and you're feeling a little bit more steady, then you quietly name what's happening for you. You can say, I'm fawning. That's what this is. And even just naming it can create enough space to make a different move then. Or you can anchor yourself with a little sentence, something like, discomfort isn't danger. Or that disappointment is not my emergency. This is a great one. And then let that phrase hold you while your nervous system catches up with you. And you'll start to notice something. You'll notice the urgency fades. You breathe a little deeper. You find asking yourself a better question, not how do I keep them happy, but what would an honest response be to their request? And that's the shift. That's what it feels like to take yourself off autopilot and to start choosing instead of reacting. So physically grounding yourself is one, but I'm going to give you 5 or 4 more small techniques to switch the autopilot off. The first one is a 3-second pause. Now, picture this. You're in a meeting. Someone asks you if you can take something on, if you can do something, and you feel it. That inner scramble, that pull to say, sure, no problem, even though it absolutely is a problem. Instead of reacting instantly, give yourself the 3-second window. Literally count it if you have to. Let the question land and then let your body catch up. And then say, let me have a think and get back to you. Or, can I check my capacity first? Or, just sit in silence. Those 3 seconds aren't empty. They are you reclaiming your choice. Now, the second one is to teach yourself how to say no in different ways. Because saying no signifies to others that you respect your time and theirs. So you have to practice some phrases that you can wheel out without stammering or scrambling for words. Like, that's not something I can commit to right now. Or, if I say yes to this, I'll be compromising something else important. Or, I'd love to help, but I can't take that on at the moment. Practice the hell out of these sentences when you're not under pressure and get used to hearing yourself saying them out loud. The third way to interrupt your people-pleasing autopilot is to build your disappointment tolerance. What I mean by that is that you will disappoint people regardless of what you say or do. It doesn't make you selfish, it makes you real. Most people pleasers avoid even the slightest possibility of someone being upset. But if you want to grow as a professional, you need to become more comfortable with making others feel mildly uncomfortable. So I suggest you ask yourself, what if them being slightly disappointed is just a price worth paying for me living in integrity? A fourth way to disrupt your autopilot is to what I call notice the leak. So people pleasing often leaks out sideways into over-explaining or backpedaling, or you pad your emails with fluff like, oh, I'm just checking in, or no worries if not. And then there's a chronic sorrying. Sorry to chase, sorry for the delay, sorry, could I just... God, these micro apologies are so annoying because everyone knows they are rarely about accountability, but they're always about preempting disapproval. You're not actually sorry, you're just afraid of being judged or being seen as too much. You need to remember that every single unnecessary sorry chips away at your authority. So replace sorry with thanks for your patience, or here's a rather good idea, Nothing at all. Say what you mean and then stop talking. The fifth and most important way to cut the pleasing autopilot is to start rewiring your success metrics. See, most people pleasers tend to measure their success by the mood in the room. But instead you should be asking, did I honor my values? Did I protect my focus? Was I clear and kind? Those are the kind of questions you ask yourself that build long-term credibility, real leadership. And yes, this is a practice. You'll get it wrong. You'll backslide and you'll keep building the muscle. But every time you interrupt that old pattern, even just once, you prove to yourself that you're not at the mercy of it anymore. So, in conclusion, you may have noticed that throughout this podcast, I've referred to being a people pleaser. And that's how many of my clients often frame it. Not just as something they do, but as something they are. Being a people pleaser becomes an identity. I'm the one who keeps things smooth, who makes life easier, who earns belonging by being agreeable. So when you start letting go of that identity, it's not just about saying no more often, it's also about becoming someone else. Someone more grounded. Someone who values kindness but isn't afraid to have an edge. Someone who can disappoint without spiraling into self-doubt. Someone who shows up, not just in ways that earn approval, but in ways that feel true. So where do we go from here? Well, as a recovering people pleaser, let me tell you the bit that no one warns you about. People pleasing has a withdrawal stage. Every time you push back, your nervous system still thinks you've committed some great social crime. So the guilt kicks in, the urge to fix it, to soften it, to over-explain why you said no, maybe even change your mind. And the first few times you override that reflex, you probably won't feel proud. You'll feel rude, unkind, selfish. But those are feelings, they're not facts. You consider them a leftover residue from an old coping mechanism that's slowly losing its power. And yes, not everyone will love the new you. Some people liked you better when you make things easy for them. Let them adjust. That discomfort belongs to them, not you. Because every time you say no when you mean no, you're not closing a door, you're opening one. A door to more steadiness, to more presence, to more self-trust. And here's the thing, those are the very qualities that make people take you seriously. Boundaries signal self-respect. Clarity builds credibility. And this is just about your inner peace. It's about how you lead, how you're heard, and how you're seen. Because when you stop diluting yourself to keep others comfortable, people start experiencing you as someone with gravity, someone whose presence carries weight. So here's your homework. Next time the pleasing reflex flares up, pause, ask yourself, would I rather be liked right now or respected in the long run? And take it from someone who used to say yes before the question was even asked, you'll start to thrive. And one day you might even make a podcast about it. Hey, it's Kris here. If this resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone else who needs to hear it. And if you want more insights on leadership, confidence, and growth, you can hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you soon.